Hi, everybody. Welcome to season 3 of the Same 24 Hours podcast. And I am totally stoked about today's guest. Her name is Lynn Renee Maxcy, and she is a Hollywood writer. And she has written on The Handmaid's Tale, which is one of my absolute favorite shows at the moment, and probably of all time. So I was totally stoked to talk to her. I've got a new book coming out in December, and I love to talk to writers. Love to talk to writers and their process, and especially someone who's written for Hollywood. I figured I've never talked to someone like that. I don't know what this is about. I want to know. Come be on my podcast. It's really that simple. Sometimes not. But Lynn Renee Maxcy is a fantastic writer. She's a lot of fun, and we had a great conversation. So super excited about this episode, which I know you guys will enjoy, getting a peek into this world of writing for the screen. Very cool stuff. So enjoy this episode with Lynn Renee Maxcy.
Welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast with Meredith Atwood. We all have the same 24 hours each day, and it's what we do with those hours that makes all the difference between our health, happiness, and success.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Atwood. Today's guest is Lynn Maxcy. Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I came across your Instagram when I was literally, the new season of Handmaid's Tale had landed. I was stretching on the floor in my Latin shirt that has the "Don't let the bastards get you down" hashtag on it in Latin. And I was flipping through and I was like, I'm going to search this hashtag. And I did. And I saw like a really awesome post on Instagram. And then it was one of yours, and it said writer for Handmaid's Tale. And I was like, ooh, I want to talk to her.
I love that
and
so
I
much.
asked you, and here we are. So
here we are.
It's just funny how you end up talking to people sometimes.
I know. I love it. I think it's one of the best things about social media. For all of its, faults and foibles, there's something really lovely about just finding people that you click with who live, across the country or across the world. It's
so funny.
Fabulous.
So funny.
Yeah.
So where did you get your start as a writer, and then how did you get into writing for television?
It has been a long and kind of crazy process. As far as getting into writing, I came home from second grade and announced to my parents that I was going to be a writer one day, and it was settled after that. Like I never wanted to do anything different. I had no plan B. It was just.
Do you remember why? Was there what made you decide that? Was there a story and you're like, I'm going to do that?
Yeah, in my second grade class, we wrote these stories. We were each individually going to write a story and then illustrate it. They were going to put it together. And I loved it. And I couldn't figure out why not everyone else loved it as much as I did. And that was kind of the first moment of like, I wonder if this is something. And I just honestly fell in love with it and ran with it. I feel very grateful that, when I came home and told my parents, they were like, you go, girl, like do that.
And also to figure out what you wanted to do with your life at, I don't know, age 7.
Yeah. It was a little crazy.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. But from that, I just, continued writing and kind of had this lovely space of, I'm in 5th grade and writing. Like I'm not thinking about doing it professionally. I just know that I love doing it. And so by the time, I finished high school, got to college, I went to the University of Colorado and got my degree in creative writing. And then getting into TV, I met a cute boy in college and married him immediately. And he was a good one. I knew I had to snap him up.
That's right.
So then when we graduated from college, we just packed up our car, no jobs, no apartment, and moved to Los Angeles. We knew we both wanted to be in the entertainment industry. I had a pretty good idea that I wanted to write. My husband wanted to do something in production. He's an assistant director now. And we just kind of started with, this crazy city where we didn't know anybody and just started meeting people and doing internships. And I was able to work in a lot of different kind of arenas within the industry. In a production office, I worked for Heyday Films, the production company that did Harry Potter. So I was there kind of right at the end of the Harry Potter run. And then I found my way to a writer's office on Eureka. And then I went to Alphas, did a bunch of other stuff, and then was on Covert Affairs on USA, where I was lucky enough to get, I wrote the web series for it that season. And then I co-wrote an episode with my showrunners. And that was kind of my first, leap into, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to do this.
Wow.
And then, yeah.
It's so interesting that you guys, it's so interesting that you both just, and maybe this is the freedom that comes with being young and dumb and straight out of college, where you're like, we'll just go do this. But it's so amazing that you just did. So many people, quote unquote, want to do something, right? And then they just can't, for whatever reason, can't get moving, can't get started, can't make the leap. Was it hard to make the leap, or it was it was just what you were doing? You knew it, you knew what you wanted, and you went after it.
Honestly, I think it was a little bit of both. There's a little bit of if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. So we should absolutely pack up our car and move to Los Angeles. But it's terrifying and hard and scary. And, I had lived in the same, 5-mile radius my entire life. And so to just suddenly up and move 1,000 miles away was a big deal. But I think that risk and that willingness to kind of jump off the cliff and build the parachute on the way down feels pretty, core to who I've always kind of tried to be as a person. Like, take this smart, crazy risk, but, go for it.
And you said your parents were super supportive from pretty much second grade on. So did that have a big effect on you? Did anyone ever try to discourage you from becoming a writer? Were they like, maybe you should do something that might make you more money, or, be a doctor or something? Like, did you ever struggle with the idea of being in the arts?
Oh, I definitely did. Yeah. I definitely did. I feel very lucky that my parents were, as incredibly supportive as they were, because for the longest time, I didn't realize that it was a little bit crazy to say I was going to be a writer when I grew up.
Right.
And so by the time I got to, being a grown up, I had spent so many years kind of practicing saying, I want to be a writer. I am a writer, that it was normal. But yes, of course, there were definitely people who, they're right to say this, like announcing you're moving to Hollywood feels a little bit like, I'm leaving to join the circus. Like,
right.
Yeah, maybe think this through a little bit. But it's a crazy risk. And there were a lot of years of, living in a tiny apartment and loving life, but also kind of being like, oh my goodness, I hope this works out.
Right.
I hope I didn't do something stupid. Now I'm 8 years in and,
it's so
what am I going to do?
Though. I just hope, I don't know if young people even listen to podcasts, but I just hope they do and hear this, because my story, I wanted to be a writer too. I wanted to be a writer, a photographer. I wanted to do both, whatever. I wanted to be doing this. I wanted to be behind a camera or with a pen in my hand, and at some point I went off to college. I was going to major in journalism. I wanted to be like a beat reporter. I wanted to do the dirty work.
Yeah.
And someone said to me, you're going to be dirt poor being a writer. And I had a fear of being dirt poor because I liked food and I didn't want to be hungry. And I was like,
yeah, who among us has not also thought that?
Right. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And instead of doing what you did and being like, no, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to be, and I'm going to do this, I was like, oh crap, I should make a different decision. And so I did this complete about face, and I went and got a straight English degree with the intention of going to law school, because that's what people with English degrees with no real plan do. They go to law school. And then I spent,
you do.
Yeah. And then I spent 13 years in a profession that I hated. But 6 years into that, I started writing. I started blogging because I was like miserable. And I was like, I have to do this because this makes me happy, you know. And only now, 20 years after the fact, that after I said I want to become a writer, am I actually a writer? You know, I just took this detour. This ridiculous detour. So it's so great that you just stuck to it because you're like leap years ahead, you know, because you did what you're supposed to do. You didn't take a detour. It's awesome.
It's been crazy. I feel very, very lucky and very happy that I did what I did.
Well, I don't know how much I mean, everything. Well, how much do you think is luck versus hustle and hard work? That's a good question.
Well, it's funny because I get asked this question quite a bit. Because I do in a lot of ways feel lucky. I was in the right place at the right time and met the right people. But I think there's also, you know, a lot of, I had done the work so that I was ready when I crossed paths with the right people to show up and do the work. I wasn't just, you know, sitting at home waiting for something to fall on my front doorstep. But yeah, I think it's a bit of both, honestly.
Yeah. So when you met the right people, who were those people and where are you now? Like, what are you doing on a daily basis? What is your job?
So right now I'm on hiatus from the Handmaid's Tale. We just finished season 3 and it's airing right now. We're very excited to have it out in the world at last. After
so it is season 3. I was thinking it was season 2, but I've watched all of them. Okay, so season 3. Yeah.
Yes. So season 3 is airing, and you know it's so much fun to finally have it out in the world and to be able to see people's reaction to it and talk about things that, you know, because I've been a writer on the show, I've known that we're getting to, you know, this story point or this character for a year and a half or, you know, whatever it is, and then somebody comes up to me and is like, oh my gosh, this happened on the episode. And I'm like, how do you know that? Oh, wait, it's out in the world. This is great. I can finally talk about this. So my job right now looks like, it's kind of weird. It's a lot of development. I mean, a lot of my days right now just look like me sitting in my office with my computer or, you know, staring at the bulletin board with a bunch of Post-it notes all over it, looking for the next stories that I'm going to tell, whether it's, you know, on Handmaid's Tale or, you know, I just did a feature earlier this year called The Complex that will be out sometime in 2020. And I just get to sit and really tell the stories that I believe in and get them ready to then take out into the world and, you know, hopefully find amazing partners and amazing companies who also want to tell, you know, sci-fi stories of hope and self-sacrifice.
So what was the process? Like, how does this even work? I mentioned before we started recording, I've never talked to a writer for a television show. And I literally, and I saw on your Instagram that you like Schitt's Creek. And I was like, oh my God, I love that show. So that's a sidebar, but that was just, I don't know why I just said that because it just occurred. For some reason it popped in my head.
I love it. I am indeed obsessed. It's a fabulous show. Everyone should watch it.
Where, I mean, and the writing on that show is just absolutely brilliant. So brilliant. But how does Handmaid's Tale go from a book to being written to what is this process and where did you get involved and what does it feel like to have, you know, you write it for the screen, right? And then they do it. I mean, you've got to just be blown away sometimes especially that show, it's just so beautiful and oh my gosh, so many questions. But like, how's the process work?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's been a really amazing, crazy process. The book is just so masterful and amazing. I mean, I read the book for the first time when I was in college in a literature class and just completely fell in love with it. And had continued to love it all the way through. And then I had met Bruce Miller, the showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale, when I worked for him on Eureka, and then I went with him to Alphas. And so there had been quite a few of us that had been together on different shows for quite a while. So I have been lucky enough to be involved in the Handmaid's Tale, the show, from pretty much the very beginning, when, it was getting up and on its feet. And, TV development takes a long time. So generally, even by the time you see a TV series, hit your screen, there are people who have been working on it for, 2 or 3 years at that point.
Right.
It just, it's a lot of steps to get there. But it's been, we just kind of took the book and really wanted to honor the style and the story that Margaret Atwood had brought so beautifully to the page. And then we were able to take it, it's one of the beauties of working in television is that you get to take, you have more time, you have more story to tell. And so we are able to, actually go and see parts of the story that Margaret had just alluded to, or, the colonies in the book are just some faraway danger, a terrifying place, obviously somewhere you don't want to go, but you never go there in the book, because Offred never goes in the book. And so then as a TV series, we're able to take those ideas and that she just mentioned it, but what if we went there? What if we continued the story? And so it's just been amazing to, really dig into this book together with, the 9 writers that are in the Handmaid's Tale writers room, and just continue to tell a story for this, this time and this place that
right.
find yourselves in.
That's scarily pertinent.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. So how do you write with 9 other writers? What does that process look like? You all do it together? Does someone go off and write certain scenes? How does that work?
Yeah. Every show is a little bit different. It just is kind of a function of what the showrunner wants it to look like. But generally what happens is you have all your writers. They're in the writer's room, which sometimes looks like a conference table situation. Sometimes it could look like a bunch of couches facing each other. And, you all sit and work on, here's what we want the story for the entire season to be, just kind of, these are the points, the story points that we want to get to. And then you go back and you start with each individual episode and you work together to kind of get a framework for the episode. And then one of the writers in the room or a writing team will then take the episode and then they go write the outline, the script. That episode kind of becomes their baby. They, go write it. And then the rest of the room moves on to the next episode. And so it just is this consistent, story generation, and you're all kind of thankfully in it together to make the best story possible for both, production and our amazing actors to be able to take it and run with it. But then also, looking ahead to our audience, wanting to tell a really good story. Kind of everyone's pointed in that direction, and we're all, working hard to make it happen. So, it's one of the things that I really love about working in TV is it's this beautiful blend of working with people and collaboration. And, I spend all day, every day talking and thinking and researching and, working with other people. And then there's that moment where it's okay, this is your episode. Please go lock yourself in your office until, your outline's done, until your script is done. So it's a good balance of, people and then,
solitude,
me alone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So have you ever
both worlds?
Have you ever broken off, someone goes off, Bob goes to do episode 3. Bob comes back 2 weeks later, however long, and you guys are Bob, were you even in that meeting? Like, did you miss the point? You know, like, has there ever been instances like that, or that someone just misses the boat, or you miss the boat? I mean, do you have any funny stories like that, or is
Oh
it
my
not
goodness.
like that?
No, I mean, it definitely can be like that. Thankfully, I have not been on
You have
shows
not
where
been
that's
Bob.
generally the case. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thankfully. But yeah, I mean, you know, it can totally happen, or people could go one way and everyone else is expecting them to go another. But I think when you have a really great team and, you know, everybody really focused on that collaboration, and, you know, my episode sets up the episode that comes after mine, and theirs sets up the one that comes after theirs. And, you know, it continues on. If you are kind of all running in the same direction, hopefully you avoid the crazy, like, wait, what is this? We didn't write this. We didn't talk about this. What are you doing? Which is good.
What is your favorite moment in all of Handmaid's Tale so far?
Oh, that's a bit like picking a favorite child.
Pick the favorite child. Everyone's got one. No, but I mean, I think about the episodes, and I mean, the first one for me was like, whoa, this is about to be just my favorite show ever. It was just so powerful. But then, I mean, the one where she gave birth was like, oh my God, it was incredible. I mean, every episode has just got some element. And then just the creepy factor of the ceremony. Like, every time. And I love Joseph Fiennes. Oh my gosh. And I was like, the fact that he's playing the commander, I hate now, because I loved him. And now I'm like, you're such a creeper. You're such a creeper. Well, you don't have to pick a favorite child, but you've got to have one. I know you do.
I mean, I think for me, the parts of the story that I love the most, I mean, as a writer, I get really, really drawn to stories of hope. One of the things that I say all the time is, no matter how dark it seems, there's always hope. And so I think all the way through, you know, in every episode, there are these tiny moments of hope and connection, and, you know, the sense that our characters aren't alone in what they're doing, that there's, you know, for June, that there's hope and there's love, and that it's, you know, worth it to risk danger to return to the people that she loves, and to have those friendships and those connections. And you know, so I think it's very hard for me to pick like one specific, but I think across the board, those moments of just, you know, freedom and joy in the midst of this crazy world that she finds herself in. Those are the ones that really resonate with me, and those are the ones that I'm, you know, most proud of.
Right. I always love the scenes with Serena and June, because you feel that connection, but also the distance, you know, and obviously it's all intertwined and different now by season 3, but especially in the beginning, season 1, and you would see moments where Serena would soften, and you would feel like, I hate the word sisterhood, but the sisterhood of, you know, women, but then it would just disappear. And I mean, just the paradoxes in the show are so fascinating. Yeah,
it's really fun as a writer to be able to really dig into those paradoxes and those complicated relationships where it's never just one thing. It's, you know, they're dealing with about, you know, 12 different levels of, you know, we're women in this world, but we're also moving towards the same goal. But tomorrow we're going to be moving towards different goals. And then the day after that, we'll be, you know, back in the same boat again. And it's just, it's kind of beautiful to get to dig into that, even when it's hard and heartbreaking. It feels very, very real.
Yeah. So when you're working on the script, do you know at that point who's been cast?
It depends, but we generally have a pretty good idea. I mean, with our leads, obviously, we know.
Okay.
You know, we know who they are, so we can kind of write to who they are and who they've created the character to be as well. But generally, you know, for the actors that are coming in for just the one episode, for, we meet their character once and then never again. A lot of times we're writing the character with an idea of, what they look like or who they are, but then, we won't see auditions until later in the process. Once the episode is actually prepping to get shot, then we find, the right actor for the right role. And it's such a fun experience when you find, like, oh, there you are. That's who it is.
That's not who I wrote.
Yeah, again, you come back to the collaboration of it all, of, we get to write a character and then an actor comes in and brings, they take what we've done and they run with it, and they, bring their own gifts and talents to the role. And it's really fun to see it kind of all unfold.
Yeah, I guess so. I have so many questions. I have, like, how much time, say Bob comes back with episode 1 of season 2 and you guys love it. So what is the time from, do you guys complete the whole season? Like, does the whole season get written before it goes into production, or does the first 3 episodes go? Like, what's the timeline? Because obviously it's really slow, just like the publishing industry. Everything is glacial pace. But what's kind of the turnaround for that?
It depends on where we are in the season. So at the beginning of this season, just the writer's room is up and going. And so we get as far as we can, get as many episodes written as we can beforehand, but then production will start up. And so then we're, doing production and writing future episodes, and it gets, extremely crazy, but extremely fun to see it all take shape. So it can be anywhere from, I wrote this 5 months ago to, okay, here's, towards the end of the season, the time frame gets a little bit shorter. So you're just, the nature of production.
So it's not that slow, really. Toward the end, you may be writing 2 weeks ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and, so that's scary.
Yeah. And like every show is different. Right. There are some shows that are doing, 22 episodes a year, or their time frame is just shorter. And so, every show that you're on can be a little bit different, but, keeps us on our toes for sure.
And I love that the shows, and it's not Handmaid's Tale, but ones where they start off with a bang, because you can tell someone had a great idea and they, I guess, wrote like maybe 5 episodes, and then there's a clear delineation when they were like, we don't know what else to do with this, like bring in the aliens or something. You know what I mean? Like it just got ahead of them, or it moved so fast that it felt like the story suddenly got out of control. Like I'll see that on a TV show and I'm like, oh, they didn't know this was going to be so popular. Because now they brought in like a weird storyline. I just think that's funny. That's how I've envisioned it. Like then the writers are writing furiously in the back of their car, just trying to get some story out there because the demand's so high. But
well, I can say so far there are no aliens in Handmaid's Tale and no plans for that, which is saying something, because again, I'm such a sci-fi girl. I'm like, guys, what if there are aliens? So far, none.
Serena in the last episode. Yeah. Commander and Serena pull off their mask and they're aliens, and it explains it all.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we've been writing episodes of the Twilight Zone the whole time.
That's right. Just kidding, everyone. Just kidding. So how much longer is Handmaid's Tale? Is there another season?
I do not have the answer to that question.
Okay.
We want to tell the story that we want to tell in the time that it takes to tell it. Mm-hmm. But I don't have, a number or a plan or, here's what we're looking at. But, there's so much story that we still haven't told, pieces of the book that we haven't gotten to, pieces of the story that, we've found internally, that we're very excited to continue telling the story.
So how do you take criticism in your industry? Like, is it difficult? Is it hard to not take criticism personally? Or is it just like everything else that it still stings? Or is it easier because you've worked with a team? Like, Is it always hard to get criticized?
I think for me as a writer, I mean, it's on one level, it is hard to get criticized because, you wouldn't have put it out into the world unless, I wouldn't have put it out into the world unless I thought it was awesome. So then to, hear criticism or pieces that people didn't like, it can be definitely really difficult. But one of the things that, I've seen and I've learned as I've gone along, the more I've spent time, in this industry being a writer, is that a lot of times that criticism is actually a gift because it comes, generally it's going to come from people who care enough to tell you that they didn't love it, or they'll care about the story and be, passionately involved in the way that it's turning out. And so, I think for me, one of the worst things that could happen is if I write something and people are like, yeah, it was fine, rather than I would rather that you absolutely love it or absolutely hate it. I want to provoke, a reaction. And so if, for me, if I can listen to the criticism and take it to heart in, a good, healthy way that hopefully doesn't involve me falling apart and eating ice cream for dinner because I'm so devastated. If I can really take it and look at it and, kind of pay attention to why the criticism came and, to take a good hard look at what I'm saying and what I'm writing to say, oh, yeah, I could actually make that better. Well, then fantastic. I can take it and make my scripts or my story better. And just, hopefully then put something that's even better out into the world and oh, thank you, people that give me notes. But, I think that's one of the cool things about LA that I've found is, you kind of have to find your community. You find your people, people that you love and trust. I don't necessarily, when I'm writing, a pilot of my own that I'm going to take out, that's going to be in development and will hopefully get made, I don't send it wide to everyone and be like, here, tell me what you think of it. I'm very specific in sending it to people that I love and trust, and, people that I trust their criticism. I trust what they have to say, that it's going to be coming from, a great, kind place, even if they're sending it back and being like, this sucks, you should definitely burn this and, never touch it again. They're still thank you for loving me.
Right.
I take your criticism well. It's that piece of community that I think, it's very apparent in any kind of creative environment, because you have to get notes, whether you're a writer or a director or an actor or a painter, or a musician, anything like that. And so you kind of have to, you look for that community, and those people who are going to kind of keep you on the path that you want to be on, with your stories that you're telling and with your life, kind of the way that you spend your time. I want to make sure that, I'm spending my time going in the right direction so that I have, the best chance of doing the most good and the most awesome things, hopefully.
Right.
All goes according to plan.
Exactly. The grand plan. So what are some lessons that you've learned the hard way?
There are so many.
I learned all my lessons the hard way, so
fallen flat on my face a few times. Honestly, one of the lessons I learned the hard way was that, I'm a writer. I'm not an athlete, but I still have to really take care of myself. I have to sleep. I have to eat healthy. Even though lots of people are like, what? You're not an athlete. You're not training for a marathon or anything, but it's a very intense job. And so if I'm eating healthy and actually trying to sleep and not just living on, coffee and 5-hour energies, it helps me show up in the world just a better human, but also as a better writer. I had, I have definitely like crashed and burned pretty hard, including a trip to the hospital one time, because I, sort of forgot to sleep for several weeks, months. I've learned my lesson. I would like to not go back there again. But I think, there's a little bit of on another side, there's a sense that, a writer tends to be kind of, alone with their typewriter or alone with their computer in some abandoned cabin somewhere. It's very Hemingway or Thoreau.
Right.
Like that's what people still think. And I think, there's a tendency, especially because, I am more of an introvert. I like spending time on my own. I like being alone writing. You kind of forget that you actually do need people. You need community. You need to get away from your computer and, go live life with your family. Go be inspired. Go, to museums. Go see what other people are doing. And I think that that was the thing that, especially when I first moved to LA, was a lesson I had to learn kind of the hard way because, the first little bit after you're in LA, you don't know a lot of people and you're just sort of like, this is great. I can write and do my own thing. Until you get a month in and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen anyone in, months.
Or showered. I haven't bathed either.
I should be a person. That's weird. And so, I really had to learn that, for me, living life is just as important as the time that I spend in front of my computer. And I spend a lot of time writing every single day. But it's still really important for me to get out in the world and call people and connect with people. I mean, especially, for better or worse, LA can be a very lonely city because people are moving and, oh, I'm here for this. And now I'm leaving for a project for 6 months. And so I guess I won't see you for 6 months. And, you just have to really lean into that idea of, hey, even if it's hard or difficult or kind of uncomfortable, nope, get out there and live your life with people, and hopefully love them well, while you're doing it.
Yeah. So what does a day look like for you? If you're working on an individual project, I mean, people ask me this all the time. What does your day look like? And I always struggle with the answer, even though I live my days every day. I just struggle with well, I don't know. I get up and then go to the bathroom, but but what does a day look like for you with the writing habit? I mean, writers always talk about how if you're a writer, you write, you have a habit, you write. So how do you kind of make sure that you're always working towards your goal or continuing to come, to the computer when you feel like the well is empty?
Yeah, which definitely happens a lot. So for me, I'm an early riser. I love getting up, at 5 or 6 in the morning. I'm an enormous coffee drinker. I should probably deal with that at some point, but it's that ritual of waking up, making coffee, seeing Luke before he goes off to work, playing with my puppy. I kind of get a few minutes to just sort of orient myself in my life. And then one of the best things that I did a few years ago was I started having Luke, my husband, schedule stuff for me. In his job, he's an assistant director. So he's the guy who works on a show and he takes the script and then turns it into a schedule so that 150 people who are working on the show know where to be and, what time to be there and what they need to bring, basically so that everyone can then do their jobs to bring the show to life. So
wow, that's not a big job.
No, not at all.
Oh my gosh.
His job would stress me out too. I would die. I would honestly die. But he is extremely good at it. And I realized, oh, you're used to writing a schedule for 150 people. Could you also write one for me? Just for my writing time. And so we sit down and he basically writes a schedule that I then stick to. And yeah, there are definitely days that I'm sort of, sitting at my computer, just like staring at the blinking cursor, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But it's also just so much about showing up and, yes, sometimes inspiration hits and I'm, at my computer at some weird time writing a bunch of stuff. But then other days it's just, writing is work. I still have to figure things out. And sometimes that looks like, me sitting at my computer actually writing. Sometimes it looks like, I'm doing research on a project and, reading up about, the background or the science behind the science fiction that I'm writing. And then other times it can genuinely just look like me, sitting in my office, kind of looking at a blank wall and just, finding the story. And it all seems very kind of weird and esoteric, even as I say it out loud and kind of hearing it. Because, there have been days that Luke has come home and, I'm sitting on the couch just like, staring at the wall. And he's like, Are you working right now? Or are you just like sitting? And I'm like, oh, I'm working. He's like, cool. I won't disturb you. But it is weird that like, that is sometimes what my writing life looks like. It looks like, just sitting and thinking and imagining. I mean, I feel very, it's so much fun to literally, like, I make stuff up for a living. I literally play professional make-believe.
That's awesome.
So you just have to like spend the time to do it.
Do you ever find that professional make-believe, that it would be easier to tell just a nonfiction story? Because I do all my writing like nonfiction, like what's going on with me, what, self-help kind of stuff. And then I keep saying I'm going to write fiction. And I have this story I've been turning in my head for 20 years. And I sit down to write it and it freaks me out. I don't know why like make-believe is worse than talking about like truth for me. Yeah. 'Cause it would seem to be easier to make up stuff.
And here's the thing. First off, you should absolutely write your story. Even if you only ever just write it for you. Don't think about it, a couple years down the road or it being out in book form. Like just write it for yourself first. Get it on the page and see what you've got. It's that. But also on the flip side, I totally get what you're saying, because for me, nonfiction terrifies me. Because I'm so used to working in the world of fiction that to, actually
you don't even know what's true anymore.
Yeah. Like this is nonfiction. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I get a fact wrong? Like the fun thing about fiction is I can get a fact wrong and be like, no, like I meant to do that.
Right.
But, I think whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I think there's always truth that we can find, because I think at the core, there's human nature. And, sometimes the stories, whether they're nonfiction or fiction, can be really difficult. Sometimes they can be really full of joy and imagination. I think it all crosses over and you can get to that core kernel of truth that people can then, take in their life. I mean, there are books that have inspired me and episodes of television that have, completely inspired me. Even though it was fiction, it like changed the way I lived my, real world life.
Yeah.
I think
do you find it hard to keep, like, what is your mental process when you start out with a new story? How do you diagram the characters so you can keep them straight? Do they get names and faces in your mind? Because that's kind of the trouble. So I started diagramming, like, okay, this character is this is this. And then I kind of put it next to me while I was writing so I could remember who these people were, even though I have an idea of them. And so then I get lost because I feel like I should know who they are, and maybe I need to just let it go and let them become the character as I write. Like, I think that's where I'm getting stuck on the process, because in nonfiction, you kind of know what you want to say, I guess. And maybe with fiction, I'm getting lost because, one, I think I'm scared of what I might say think I'm scared of where the story's going to go. And then I think maybe I feel like I have to have it all figured out. So kind of what is the process for you?
It is scary, honestly. Like, so you feeling afraid if you're looking ahead, like that's not crazy. I get freaked out every time I sit down to tell a new story. So for me, the way that it works is once I kind of just have this ongoing ideas document. It's literally just a Word document on my laptop that I just, oh, that's an interesting idea. Oh, that's an interesting world. I just keep track of everything. And then sometimes I'll go back and really start thinking about it. And a lot of times the way that I know that a story is the right one that I want to tell is when I start waking up in the morning thinking about it, when I find myself, telling friends or Luke about, oh, I have this story idea. Okay, that's the 5th time I've talked about this. Okay, I think it's time, for me to write this. And then, I do something that's very similar to what it sounds like you do. I start thinking about the characters, who they are, what they might look like, kind of who they are and how they fit in this world. And then, it's literally Post-it notes on the wall next to my desk of character names. For me, because I write in, TV and film, I do tend to write specific characters for specific actors, like just, okay, I think this person would be an excellent version of this person. And it helps me keep the characters straight. But
that's a good idea.
It helps. And there are tons of writers that don't do that. It would drive them crazy.
No, that would be great. I could just go ahead and put Renelle Zellweger in the role, and then I can stop worrying about the facial expressions because I know what they are.
You know what they are. And it's really great. And then there is generally, when I sit down to write a story, I have a rough idea of where I want the story to go. Okay, I'm telling a story that is, about self-sacrifice. So probably at the end of the story, like one of the characters is going to sacrifice himself. Or, I'm telling this story about, the intersection of science and storytelling. And so I really want to make sure that my character at the end is like an amazing scientist and has like a breakthrough moment. These are all just kind of shooting from my head ideas and thoughts, but like, there is something really interesting. And for me, it's really fun where I do kind of let the story take me where it wants to go. And I find different story points along the way. I find, I've had moments where I've been writing one story and then, suddenly, ooh, this character could be interesting. Like this is very, thing of writers, as I think, but I'm in the middle of writing my first novel, which is a crazy big thing that I'm, jumping into this year. And I had a moment where I had my 2 characters walking through a neighborhood, and kind of out of nowhere, this third character just like ran out of her house and joined the conversation. And I was like, I don't know who you are, but you're fun and you have a very loud, crazy voice. And now she is a main character in the rest of the novel. And she wasn't someone that I, ever anticipated, when I sat down to start the novel. I have no idea she was going to be there, but here she is, and I'm very glad for it. So it is.
That's the point too, is you've got to lean into that and let it go, because every time I sit down to write, that's what happens to me. And I'm like, wait, who is this person? Or what is this event? And I need to just let it go, because that third person's supposed to be in your novel.
Yeah, just like run with it. And honestly, if you get to a point where, you get pages and pages in or chapters in and you're like, oh, I actually don't like where this is going. Great, go back. Like, you don't have to stick with it. There's like, God invented the delete key for a reason.
Right.
But it's, there's a little bit of, because you are the one who gets to control the story, you can, take those kind of surprise characters or random detours. And if they work for the story, fabulous, keep them. Otherwise, you can definitely like backtrack until you find the place you're happy and go from there again.
And for anyone who's starting to write, I don't know what program or what methodology you use, but every day I open up my document to write, I save it as a new version. And then if I decide to make massive cuts, I save that as a new version. So I'll have like a day that might have 3 versions. But any book or major thing I write, I have a file that has, at the end of the day, I'll have like 150 versions. But anyone that's starting to write, make sure you do that, because you never want to delete permanent. You want to have whatever you might have chopped earlier. It's really helpful. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
That seems commonsensical, but I didn't do it for a long time, and then it was dumb.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, wait, that one paragraph was so smart. I wish I still had it.
Yeah. Well, Lynn, this was super fun and enlightening, and I feel like I learned so much. I know so much about writing in Hollywood now. I'll just go do that. So what is, this podcast is called The Same 24 Hours, meaning we all have the same 24 hours in our day, but it's what we do with those 24 hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. So I like to ask my guest, what is one thing that you do on a daily basis that you think kind of gives you the greatest reward, that's helps you stay consistent, that keeps you on the right path? What is one thing that you can kind of point to?
Ooh, one thing. For me, I think the one thing that I do every day is, before I sit down to write, I take a few minutes, and 3, 4, 5 minutes, I really stop and think about why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why am I writing? And what's the thing that I hope I put out into the world, both with writing and with my life. And I hope that I, am a person who encourages grace and hope and joy and community. And so if I can sit and just take those few minutes to really remind myself what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, I always feel like the days that I do that are much more productive and much more, filled with grace and community and people. And, it just makes me very, very thankful for where I am.
Yes. Gratitude is awesome.
Yeah,
well, thank you, Lynn. Please keep me posted on when your feature comes out, and of course your novel. I will.
Thank you.
Talk to you again about the novel.
Yes.
Well, this third girl that runs out of a house.
Yeah. She's pretty great.
Well, thank you so much.